First, I want to just address the room because I think space is really important, whether it's a web space or a physical space. And in my work these days, I work a lot with classrooms and faculty, and movable chairs and tables are all the rage, right? Like everybody wants a flexible classroom or something that can be moved. So I wonder, when we're in here sitting at separate tables, more or less, this is actually something that needs to be observed by us and wondered about why we behave in this way. Because it doesn't seem like the optimal space to work in, right? I mean, we probably walked in here thinking, oh, there's going to be a packed room, so I'll just sit anywhere. The truth is, it's not. So is it the teacher's job to do some, like I learned to be a K-12 teacher, some classroom management and say, okay, everybody sit up in the front? Is it my job to do that? Right now, right at this minute? And how would you feel if I did that? Put out? Unhappy? You're almost all unhappy right now because nobody's laughing about it, right? I'm not going to move. I have all my stuff here. And rightfully so. But isn't it weird that we do this? And I'm going to tell you a story about a bunch of people who go to work every day and teach in classrooms and do just what every teacher does. They shut the door, they ignore policy, they ignore protocol. They do their work as educators. And we are all so blessed to have them. But they all stay in those rooms or in their offices, right? And they don't sit at the same table very often. And when they do sit at the same table, it's pretty much a scripted agenda that everybody has 3 minutes on, and they go through the budget crisis, they go through the, who's up for tenure or who's not, and this and that, and then they all leave. But rarely do they sit at a table together and talk to one another in an unscripted environment reflecting on, I don't know, Greek yogurt or whatever's happening in their classrooms, right? So that's what this presentation is about. Let me tell you real quick first, because I got to say this, I think it's important. There was a time, and many of you probably were in this game long before me, but there was a time when a thing called Ning was out there, and Blogger was kind of like the only blogging platform that I was aware of, and Wikispaces was like really popular among educators, and it was working and doing great things. And I would see people who would come from the WordCamp events, and they would have stickers like yours on their machines, and I was in awe of them. I knew just enough to be like dangerous, right? Like I knew a little bit about Blogger, and I could make it work, and I could do things. But I knew that WordPress was like this kind of super tricky, super useful, amazing thing that existed out there. And I was always in awe of the people who went to those events. One of them is here with us today, and she, you can see her up there, Cheryl. She was with a group called the Cyber Salon down in Phoenix, Arizona. And all my heroes are from there. And Cheryl and Elisa Cooper and several others. One more notable these days, a guy named Alan Levine. They were all doing WordPress so much earlier than I was, and they really inspired me by their commitment to that tool. So my story is, as an educator, working with faculty 12 years ago, say 13 years ago, Blogger was around, we saw WordPress, I discovered WordPress, I was able to begin using it at a pretty low level. I bought my own domain, got my own website. I was teaching a course at a community college called Technology for Teachers, and a lot of the students in that class were faculty at a community college. And we were in Blackboard at the time. I knew just enough, like I said, to be kind of dangerous on the web, so I started putting stuff in WordPress. And we had actually taught courses in Blogger earlier, but when I finally figured out via the DS-106 world that this thing called Feed WordPress existed, I was like, aha, that's the table. That's the table where everybody can sit at one place and have a conversation. So we're all familiar with Feed WordPress, yes? Anybody not? Feed WordPress is a plugin for WordPress that allows you to pull in posts from other blogs and display them on the blog page or the home page. So essentially, we can all be students in this room, but all your writing can be fed into one single site, which of course is the table, right? Or the classroom. So that's what we did, and it worked. And I'm going to just tell you here briefly a little story about getting my students, which are faculty, to participate in an event where I asked them to write about teaching and learning. In my experience as an instructor. So I get the vibe here that many of the folks here at this event are probably under IT lines of reporting, possibly, or in your case, probably 8 different people. But I'm under like academic affairs land, right? So I work only with faculty. That's my job. Like, I don't do anything IT, and I'm not technical by nature. So what I learned was that faculty don't share the great things they do very well with a lot of people. Maybe they're close friends, but not a lot of people. So what I learned was that if I could get one of them at a faculty showcase or to do something that demonstrated anything they were doing in online classes, that if I could share that with their colleagues, number one, their colleagues listened to them more than they would listen to me. And number two, things would actually kind of spread more quickly than the classic like 1-hour workshop where 9 people show up and those 9 people do something, and it just very kind of slow growth. So what we thought was if we could get a bunch of faculty to write about the work they do, and we could make it easy for them to access it, we might have something going, right? So we did, right? And we used a WordPress site. We had been in the university CMS world, which 13 years ago was just not what I knew the web could do. So I bought a domain, we put WordPress on it, we put all our tricky, cool stuff on it, and we challenged the faculty to write about teaching and learning. And so that's where this comes from. We asked them to write for 9 weeks, 1 post with 25 sentences each week, and that's where like the numbers come from. And I'm going to show you some variations on that have happened over the years. Fair enough? Any questions? Okay, I haven't done PowerPoint in a long time. Back when I did, I made this cool little presentation that I'm just going to show you because it's so nice. And if I were to recreate it right now, it would be even more brilliant because the idea is really good. But I'm just going to go through like 5 different qualities that this event had, which I think are really interesting. Fair enough? Let's see. Okay, so Cheryl's going to be slightly in the way of some of my super fancy images here. So if anybody followed Mike Wesch's anth101.com course last year sometime, and the amazing Tom Woodward, who did some of the work in the background of that WordPress site, the language that Mike Wesch uses instead of assignments was challenges. Words are important as we are learning more and more these days, right? So how you present this is what I expect you to do makes a difference. If you assign it to somebody, they hear one thing. If you challenge them to do it, they hear something else. So we challenged our faculty to write. Now, I didn't make fun of them in my normal, like, you'll never be able to do that, but we definitely kind of tainted the language with this idea that I'll bet you can't do this. And it kind of worked, right? So we challenged them to write about teaching and learning. So everybody likes to be appreciated. We all You know, there is something about being recognized in public that really works. And we utilized that strategy in a couple ways. We realized that money would never be enough to get faculty to do this. Like, we couldn't have paid them enough to write about teaching and learning and actually do it. That would have just been too weird. Why do that? We wouldn't have gotten any money to do it anyway. I think what we all learned in the first iteration of this was that a community was formed where there wasn't one before. Because like 16 faculty were working hard, they were sharing their thoughts, which initially were like, yeah, I had oatmeal for breakfast and I teach online and I use discussion boards, to these pretty amazing pieces of writing about teaching and learning. You know, most of them had never written. Almost all of them had never written about teaching and learning, except for in their resume where it said your teaching philosophy, right? They didn't drill down to specific topics in the world of teaching and learning. So as they wrote over the weeks, one, the writings got way longer than 25 sentences, and two, they became incredibly insightful pieces of writing. In fact, one of them got published like right away on Faculty Focus, which is out of the University of Indiana in Milwaukee, I think, one of the magnet people. But it was great because people came together and worked together. We scheduled it right in the middle of the semester. It ended before Thanksgiving. It started like 3 weeks into the quarter. There is no time, right? There is no time for faculty development in today's world, right? So this, unlike a 1-hour workshop in a room or a recording or a webinar, this allowed them to kind of do the writing on their own whenever they wanted. And they did brilliant. And I think for them, the effort, and you could read this on the links on the website, some of their reflections were really, really powerful. So WordPress gave them a platform, right? They were unfamiliar with these things. They all learned that there was something other than Canvas or Blackboard to deliver information. They visited those things in the past, but did they really know about them? Not so much. Did they ever actually use them? Almost never. It gave them, I think, as if you have your own blog that you can dress up, it's kind of like your living room, right? Where you can actually craft that space to look like you want it to look. One of the things I learned early on as an instructional designer was that I could make these banners in Photoshop that would somehow, and they were unique to each faculty. I'd let the faculty pick the photos they wanted to use. Somehow they became more attached to their course because there was an image that they made or they helped make in the course. And ownership of stuff is really important. Not that you don't want to share it, but if it's yours, you take care of it more than other things. And of course, the one thing that WordPress did really nice was it allowed people to comment on their work. So one of the greatest leaps in our little 9x9x25 journey was I was using Twitter at the time. I shared some of these faculty pieces of writing, and people from other universities started commenting on my little community college faculty writing. And it grew from there, which was really interesting. Other schools actually started to do it. The recognition piece, I think, similar to being appreciated, when the president and the dean saw that all these faculty were writing about teaching and learning, they were really actively impressed by what these faculty were doing. And they were saying that they were impressed publicly, which was really important. I wish today at the University of Washington, where I'm at now, which is, R1, I mean, they got research going on, they got their service commitments. Teaching and learning is, literally a third of their work. And for me, kind of from my place, teaching and learning is really important, right? There's not just one way to do your PowerPoint and do your lecture or do your whatever active classroom and you're done. It's art. So what we learned through that process of everybody's posts coming into one place was that peer pressure really does work, right? So So of the original 16, if 3 of them hadn't written by Sunday or whenever the deadline was, everybody was keenly aware of that, and it worked, right? Especially with faculty, I'm not sure why. All the work, again, was outward-facing, and I do believe that the 16 that originally participated, they definitely said that they had a sense of deeper community with one another as a result of that. As you know, many of you work with kind of institutional websites, and in these days, you know, the old, you write your essay, you turn it into your teacher, they grade it, you get it back, nobody else ever sees it, right? The web allows us to share things in a way that we couldn't do before. And I think that in my own experience with, say, Twitter and the community that I have built out there in the web, you know, most of my learning these days is through the web. And it's only because people in my work write about what they do and share that publicly that I am learning. And I think for teachers, much the same is true. I mean, reading John Dewey is super great, but I could rather read Teacher 6's from Vermont, you know, 12-paragraph post about something very specific that's in a language that maybe is a little more understandable to me, and learn a lot too. So why aren't we doing that more? At any rate, there you go. So that's my fancy presentation. I love the idea of the person at the bottom with the hands out. If I could redo that whole thing, I certainly would. I'm going to share one site real quick, and then I'm going to let Cheryl share a few words about her experience overseeing Glendale Community College's version of this same thing, which is another school that adopted they didn't go for 9x9x25. They went for 6x6. And I'm going to show you even further iterations of that language. But they did something that we did not, which was they bought their own domain specifically geared towards that project, right? Because they had, I think Elisa Cooper is probably the one who did it originally. I don't really remember. But she probably bought the domain because she'd long had her own website, and she was writing about teaching and learning and like way before I knew that was even possible. So I'm pretty sure she bought it. But essentially, it's a WordPress site, and I think they made the faculty authors on the site rather than using Feed WordPress. Cheryl might be able to speak to that. I don't recall exactly. But they picked this up. I think this is maybe their 4th year. Last year was their 4th year. And I think it's been really powerful down there. One element that's really missing in this whole conversation about the growth of an educator in their profession as teachers is that rarely is it ever part of the tenure process. Like, they are expected to do research, to be published, to do these certain things, to get a certain number in their score in their student surveys of their course and this and that. But the writing about teaching and learning is not often yet included in how faculty are evaluated for tenure. At least that was the case in Arizona, and it's still the case at the University of Washington. So any questions about any of that? That's about as technical as I'm going to get at this point. The rest of it's all more inspirational, like it can be done, you can do it. It could be your class, literally a class of students. It could be your IT group. It could be your family. It could be anything. It's just the WordPress platform using various features. Yes, sir?
Just a real simple question. I may have missed it. I get the 9 and the 25. I don't get the 9 times 9.
I know, right? I know. Who knows? So this event lasted for 9 weeks. There were 9 pieces of writing generated, and each one had 25 sentences or more.
Okay.
You know,
9 weeks.
There's zero rhyme or reason. Yeah, and wait, I'll show you the 4x250 from the University of New Hampshire. I mean, nobody really did it exactly the same, and nor would should we expect them to? So, Cheryl, can we hear you there?
I hope so. Can you hear
Awesome.
me?
We can hear you perfectly. I'm going to leave this up just like this. If you want me to change the screen or whatever, I will. I'm a little concerned about changing too much of this at the moment. But if you want me to move around on the right 6x6 site, I can. But otherwise, just maybe some of the experiences of your faculty, how they felt it was valuable. Any comments you'd like to share?
Okay. Yeah. So we did do a few things differently than you, as you mentioned. We went for 6 pieces of writing over 6 weeks. And we didn't give any kind of word minimum or anything like that. But typically, people write more than 25 sentences every time. For those who participate, it's really a loved event, and kind of for them it's an unequivocal success in community building and camaraderie. And I thought it was just me, but it's not just me. The things that they're struggling with. One of the trends that has happened over the 4 years that we've been emulating your wonderful project was like other trainings, events, and workshops that are offered by our Center for Teaching and Learning, participation begins to drop. Maybe it's that it grows stale. I think maybe one of our failures in continuing to promote it every year is that we have maybe gotten a little bit formulaic about it. So people write, if they wrote that week, we deliver a treat to their office. Sometimes it's ice cream, sometimes it's whatever. But that's kind of the same formula every year. Maybe that gets a little old. And also we may not be doing quite enough cheerleading in the outreach leading up to it. And it's mainly because it's kind of split. I don't exactly oversee it. As our instructional developer, I deal with WordPress and making sure that people get either on the blog, or that we use feed WordPress to pull their if they have a blog, we can pull their feed in. So I coordinate all of that. But we have someone else, a faculty developer, who's kind of sending out the emails and trying to get faculty to decide to participate. And we both, at least this last year, had very limited time to wrangle folks and get them started. So that may have been something that caused participation to decline. We had about 20 people sign up to participate this year, and I think probably about half of them made it all the way through. The posts are still wonderful, though. So I think probably to have better success next time, we'll need to do a little more inventive promoting, or really keep working on helping people see the value in it. So a couple of other things that we do that are a little different. You'll see on the page at the top menu, there's a writing ideas link. You don't have to click on it or anything, but we provide weekly writing prompts. We change them every year, but they're usually involved teaching and learning. And again, we offer people that we will either give them an account on this site if they don't have a blog, or if they do have a blog, they can tag their posts right 6x6, and we'll pull their right 6x6 feed into the blog. Let's see, what else do we do? I really think sharing some of the selected pieces of writing on Twitter would be a fantastic idea. Oh, another thing that we do a little bit differently is we open the participation, I guess maybe you do too, we open the participation to faculty, staff, and administrators. So we had really interesting participation coming from all 3 areas. One of our staff members took it upon herself. She worked in our marketing department, and she wrote a 6-piece series on what faculty can do to increase enrollment in their own courses. Now, for it was kind of genius because for the marketing department at WPC, they wanted to increase enrollment overall. But she was specifically helping faculty figure out ways to get students to choose their course over anybody else's. So that was actually really popular. I wasn't sure it was going to be, but it went over really well. Another, let's see, a faculty member wrote something about I wore compression socks at work, which was a really poignant post, kind of embracing her own aging, but it was also really vulnerable about her growing concern over being able to connect with students that are getting further and further away from her in age. That one it generated a lot of commentary, and it generated a lot of discussion on campus, even if it didn't generate a bunch of comments on the blog. So that was kind of cool to see community physically forming over this electronic thing that we're doing kind of, from our own desks. And then there was a post from an administrator about the month I hated my job, which was, it was, I think, really refreshing for faculty to hear frustrations from that arena and how they were overcome by letting go or relying on your team. So if you have any questions for me or thoughts to share, I'd love them, but that's kind of what has been our points of pain and our successes.
Excellent. Any questions related to those comments? Because I'm going to expand on a couple of them.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have the same faculty repeating the project annually, or is it a different group each year?
Same people each year? Some?
Oftentimes it's the same people each year, but we do really try to reach out to our newer adjuncts especially and encourage them to participate along the residential faculty. And so we do usually have new participants as well as returning.
That was definitely our experience too. We had a lot of, it's kind of like the early adopters, right? Some of those people are just consistent, they're showing up, they put way more effort in, not more effort, they put more time and thinking into doing some of these things than other people do, right? So yeah, we have a lot of the same people. Cheryl, thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, I'm going to keep going here for about 7 minutes, and then I'm going to hopefully ask for questions, and they'll all be required to have one. They don't know that yet, but we'll see how that goes. So, so the format, this is interesting. We left it wide open the first year. Well, in fact, every year it was done at Yavapai College. There was no prompts. It just had to be about teaching and learning. That was all. 3 years after we started or so, Foothills College in California started doing it, and the person there, a guy named Ben, who was in charge of faculty development, says, the vice chancellor wants to talk to you about this whole thing. They're worried about like lawsuits or something. And so I get this call from like the vice chancellor at this school, and she's asking me like, well, how do you read them all before you post them? Do you vet them in any way? Are there ever students' names? Is there any bad mouthing about the institution? And I'm like, no, we just tell them to write. They're smart people. Weirdly, so this is like 7 years later or whatever from when we started it, or when it started at Yavapai College. Just last year, one faculty's post got a whole lot of attention. Like, they're still employed there. They're like an amazing faculty, but they definitely were saying some pretty critical things about the state of humanities in education, right? And it was fascinating to watch that and get Zoom calls from my colleague back there saying, you wouldn't believe what's happening. So the truth is, and many people would say this, these things didn't just exist on the web. They actually left the web, and there was conversations in hallways, in meetings, about some of the topics that were expressed. Would that have happened anyway? Who knows? But as a former English teacher, writing's really important for us. It's a good practice to write things out. And I think that writing about, reflecting well, not just I had, oatmeal for breakfast, reflecting deeply on your practice in writing is different than wondering as you're walking down the hallway if something could be different. They're both helpful, but writing is a different expression of those things. I'm going to really quick just blaze through like some of the versions of these, and then we'll have some questions and answers, because I want to show you that they were all really varied and there was no real right or wrong answer. So the people at Glendale Community College did 6x6, as you have heard. This here is the original one, and this website was kind of my baby early on. It's not so maintained anymore to me. If I was still there, it would look slightly different. Anyway, so this is interesting. The first year we did this, if you typed in Yavapai College Teaching and Learning Faculty Writing or something like that, you would find no piece of writing on the internet anywhere from any faculty about teaching and learning. At the end of 9 weeks, with 16 participants, I turned all of their blog posts into a PDF. It was 300 pages of writing. Now that includes like a lot of half pages because some of the writings, it was ridiculous to see it in print. Now, on that website, there's something like 700 faculty written posts about teaching and learning. That's like, so if you took the time to look through them, could you make use Pressbooks and make a little faculty handbook for your division for all incoming faculty? Could you print it at some location and make it look nice? Yes, you could, right? And these are all voices of faculty, not administrators. And for new faculty coming in, hearing those voices of fellow faculty members is an important thing. So that was the original one. This is Northern Michigan College. They did 4x4x16, right? So it was only a month long and they only expected 16 sentences. Perfect, right? Most of those faculty went way past 16 sentences. So, they're setting them up, I don't know. Like I said, the numbers really don't matter that much, and especially after a couple of weeks, people just write whatever whatever length it takes. These folks were one of the first, this one got going within a year after we did our first one, and they've been doing it ever since. So they have hundreds and hundreds of pieces of faculty writing on here. This is Chadron State College, kind of echoing the 6x6 plan. I don't even know if they're on Route 66 for real, but they just started this, I think, 2 years ago. And I'm just going to take a super side note here. This was reasonably successful on the whole, right? I mean, we got our faculty to write about teaching and learning, so my goal was accomplished, or my team's goal. During that time, there was a guy named Jonathan Finkelstein, who is like the CEO now of like Credly, I think. But during his graduate school, he made these little videos called Learning Minute videos. And they were super creative videos where he talked about teaching and learning and environments, much like I was saying at the beginning. But there were these little 1-minute videos, and I'm like, these are brilliant. What if our faculty shared little short tips about teaching and learning in video? So we dreamt that up, and we called it the March for Best Practice. And we did it in Arizona, and we got like, I don't know, 40-odd videos over a few years. These folks have done it, and a couple other schools have done it. Ours at the end at Yavapai College were geared towards quality matters. So the faculty, when they made a little short video, they had to kind of say, this is addressing quality matters standard, la, la, la. And for us, especially in online classes, it provided faculty a really easy, quick way to learn what their colleagues are doing in their online classes. So that's also on this site. You can see it right in the center of the navigation here. Let's see. This will let me click up into here. So this is on the Wayback Machine, right? They took this offline. California's gone through some changes in their online learning spaces, and one has done some really great jobs with some work for faculty. But this one worked really well for a couple of years. And if you go down this page, you can still link out to all of their blogs. But this list of faculty, I'm just telling you, in the world of professional development, to get this many faculty to do anything is like huge, huge. So that was good. This is the University of New Hampshire. This was like a nursing, I think, something or other. This is on the Wayback Machine as well. At any rate, those are the examples that are there. On that website, so this is weird, any of you technical people, when you go to this page, it jumps to the bottom for some reason. So the link in the bottom video comes from some like media site-ish type proprietary something. It's not a YouTube video. I just put it in an iframe thinking it would work, and it displays fine, but it's making the page leap to the bottom, and I don't know why that is. So if any of you are technically inclined and can tell me what that is, or look at the underlying HTML. Below this is just some stories about this whole thing. I mean, I wrote something for this League for Innovation people way back. The most amazing Terry Green, who has done an incredible job interviewing people on podcasts, weirdly interviewed me about this thing not too long ago. And then there's some videos below that of people saying essentially just what I've told you here from various schools. There's Terry Green, and then this video. That's what I got. I think I got 5 minutes at least or so for 7 minutes for questions. What I will offer you is if you think this is something that somebody at your institution can make happen, I think you guys are all must be technically capable of seeing what's going on here. Way better than I can, actually, I'm pretty sure. But if you ever want advice or assistance, I can tell you this. At the inspiration level, here was the best thing I did with all of this. I thought if they wrote one time, if I could get my faculty to write one thing about teaching and learning and put it on a blog, I would give them a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And I did. And it worked like you wouldn't believe. It sounds ridiculous, but I took it to their office, frozen solid, with a spoon, and gave them a pint of Ben & Jerry's the first time they published their blog. That worked so well that I started calling various vendors saying, hey, we got all these teachers writing about teaching and learning. It's all right here. Here's the link. They were like, wow, that's great. Let me send you some shirts. Let me send you some whatevers, So all these vendors were sending us stuff. And yeah. So you gotta give people something to get them going some days. That's what I got. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So the colors that you originally started this at, are they still doing this?
Yes, they are. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The next one will start like in October-ish. But like I said, last year they had a post that just caused a lot of people challenges. So it'll be interesting to see if there are new requirements, because there was never any, right? I mean, initially, the site that was on, I own. It was mine. I paid for the hosting for it year after year for years. So it was mine, right? But anyway. All right. Everybody ask a question. Yes.
I'm just noting this. I've been live tweeting this while I'm doing this, and I have a colleague who's also a law librarian. He's like, I love this. Who else wants to do it? Let's all make it happen. Okay. And I think it might be interesting to see, even if you don't have a role like yours working with faculty, doing this within a professional association, talking to faculty who serve in that sort of role might be an easy way to get a host for it, to say, hey, those of you who do this, could you challenge each other across different schools to all write about what are the challenges of teaching in this field?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's getting, like I said, it's getting all you guys to sit at the same table. How could if I put food over here and said, okay, everybody, I know you're not going to like this, but we're all going to sit right here with this great food, you'd be over here in an instant. But if I ask you, okay, we're just going to go sit over here. I know you don't like this, but sit here. It'd be different. So however you frame it, and whoever is the leader, right? I mean, you know, I was just the dumb instructional designer who like, okay, I'll give you some ice cream if you write about this. Trust in my work is really important. I could give a whole presentation about trust because it's super. I told the people at my new job, I've been there for 3 years, I said that when I come up there, you're going to lose the best thing I have. The best thing I have to offer will be gone instantly when I move into your place. And that was the relationships I had built over 10 years with faculty. And that is the absolute truth. All my work was based on the trust of them to listen to me some days or not, you know. All right, question?
Sure, so you kind of already answered it, but this was hosted separate from your college's website.
Mhm.
You just built this website and it wasn't related.
Right.
So was it all public or private?
Everything was
How did that
public.
work?
That was weird. My boss kind of was like, I don't know about this, but I did it anyway. You know, it was weird. I mean, I think that my understanding of the web was so dramatically different from some of the more administrator management level people's version of what the web means to us that they didn't even understand what any of that meant, right? It's like there's Canvas, the university website, and YouTube. Those are the only things that exist on the web, you know? And I'm like, well, there's this other space.
The tenor of the writing to know it was for the public. That it was
Absolutely. Yeah.
About that.
No, audience is huge. As a former English instructor, you got to identify your audience right out of the gate. Question?
Sure. So kind of related to that, you know, I can definitely see how it would bring, you know, faculty and internal audiences closer together. How did it resonate with like external audiences or even, you know, students? Was it perspective, anything like that?
That's a good. So students, we don't know,
Yeah.
but it resonated with enough other faculty at enough or other people at other institutions that they copied it, right? And I mean, there is like no higher form of praise than what is that? Imitation is the highest form of praise, right? So yeah, I mean, people are actually, other schools were doing it, right? Which is why I'm here today, right? I mean, I think that writing's important as an English teacher, as a former poet. I know writing's important to me. That's the thing. All right. Okay. Good work. If you have any questions, I'm out there. I'm sure my info is somewhere on one of those things. I'd happily talk to you about who I talked to and how it worked anytime, anywhere.
Thank you all for attending. Don't forget
Thanks.
to fill out the speaker evaluation, the session evaluation.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
Thank you.